it's Deja from CrochetEverAfter.com, and right now I'm going to show you how to double crochet into the first stitch of your row. This specific tutorial is going to cover just that first, sometimes confusing stitch at the beginning of your row when you're working in double crochet. So depending on the type of pattern that you're using, it can be a few different kinds of stitches. So I'm going to show you how to tell which stitch to use and where to place it. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how to double crochet into the first stitch of your row now. I have already made a foundation chain with one row of double crochets. So if you need to learn how to do that, you can either watch my full double crochet tutorial or just the double crocheting into your foundation chain. This is going to cover the sometimes confusing subject of doing your first double crochet into a row. Now, some designers will tell you exactly where to place your hook and others won't. So sometimes you have to kind of figure it out. If your pattern reads that it says all your chain threes count as double crochets, that's going to tell you where you need to place your hook for your first stitch of each row. If it doesn't, then you might have to do a little investigative work and figure out how many stitches they're counting across. I'll get more into that. First, we're going to pretend that our pattern reads that it says every chain three counts as a double crochet. So what that means is every time you turn your work and you work a new row, you always chain three at the beginning of your row. And what that does is it creates the proper height for your double crochets as you work across. If you didn't do this chain three and you just started working your first double crochet, it would be like squished in half and you'd have very squished ends of your project. So you do this chain three to create the right height for all the rest of your double crochets in the row. So if my pattern says that my chain threes count as double crochets, what that tells me is this is a double crochet. This is counting as my very first double crochet for the row, so I don't need to double crochet into this very first stitch, or V if I look at it this way, if it's hard to see. Here's my very first V, which is the first stitch of my row, my new row. This chain three counts for the stitch that should go here. So that means my very first actual double crochet is going to go into my next stitch. So I yarn over, insert my hook, and do my double crochet. So now I have two made technically because that chain three is going to count as the first one. If it's looking a little skinny, you can always make fatter chains to kind of bulk it up a little bit. Just pull out your loops a little bit to make it a little bit fatter. And it'll give it a little bit more bulk, not much, but a little bit, so that it doesn't look quite so much like a chain and more like a double crochet. You can see it kind of bulked it up a little bit. So if your pattern says that it does not, your chain three does not count as a double crochet, and it can, there's some patterns that will say that. Usually if you're seaming your work after you're done, that chain three might not count as a double crochet. When that happens, when you are working the first stitch in your row, you're going to insert your hook into that very first stitch. So you can always look for your V if it's hard to see, and you'll do your double crochet into that stitch. If you're designing, it's up to you. I usually have the chain three count as my first double crochet because I don't like the extra loop that you get over here. I'd rather have it a little bit skinnier than all these extra loops that you'll have all the way up. But that's completely up to you. Now, if your pattern doesn't tell you if your chain three should count for a double crochet or not, you might have to look at the stitch count at the end or what the pattern tells you. So hopefully it'll give you actual numbers to work with. So if it tells you to chain three, and then it tells you to double crochet in the next 13 stitches, I have 14 stitches here. So that would mean that my chain three counted as my double crochet. If it just says chain three and DC across, and you have 14 stitches at the end and it doesn't tell you, it's going to be up to you. You can either skip that first stitch or work into it. So that's completely up to you. Hopefully the pattern will be more clear, but if you're designing it yourself, feel free to do whatever you like. But that is how you are going to double crochet into the first or second stitch of your row.